Well, it's time to finally have the discussion of should the Mulch armies be limited. So make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more content. This is one of our favorite things to see. The minute that everybody gets Mulch Army access, the next question comes down from the top. Do we need to start limiting or reducing the amount of Mulch armies that need to be in this space right now? So you're going to hear a lot of polarizing takes on the Mulch armies. A lot of them are the Mulch armies were a necessary evil for the game. A lot of them say, screw the Mulch armies, ban them. They are one of the worst things that we have ever had to deal with within the game. Two completely different opinions, right? So my opinion on this has been, I think the Mulch armies have been a great asset to the game. Now, the difference between them and Maxx C is literally, we took the unbridled, broken power that Maxx C is, and we split it up into multiple cards. Now, as you've seen multiple times throughout the history of this game, when looking at the OCG, you're going to constantly notice that every time Maxx C is involved in an argument, it's completely broken. It's the OCG tends to hate this card. Nobody tends to like having Maxx C around, but for some reason, the OCG still has Maxx C around. It's really an unfair experience. At least, depending on which Mulch army I'm under, I can still give my opponent 1 to 2 potential cards, and I can still make a decent board, which is fine. And obviously, the one thing that Maxx C had going for it versus the Mulch armies was Maxx C is just a card that you literally get punished by so badly. For example, I'm a deck that has to special summon from the graveyard and special summon from the extra deck to make multiple boards. There's certain times I might end up giving my opponent anywhere from 3 to 10 cards to be able to make a board. But the next big case and argument comes down for, just don't play such extensive combo decks. You shouldn't be playing decks that feed into this. Okay, Duelist. First of all, while that is completely true, you've got an entire group of people over here in the corner that actively will die on a hill and say that, control decks should be banned. All right, there has to be this medium in between the game space here where, mid-range decks can perform while, giving the opponent a 1 to 2 card peace of mind while you have enough to kind of play back into yourself. Now, one trade-off between the Maxx C and the whole Mulch army debate is I can go first and I can build the big Unga Bunga board of a lifetime. I can set up, all of these potential forms of interruption. Going into your turn, I can discard Maxx C, and I can, guess what? Now every time you start to kind of disassemble my board while I'm triggering my components, I'm drawing into further resources, which means I can see Ash Blossoms, Veilers, draw Lockbird even, Nibiru. These other hand trap cards that are going to further choke you out of the game. And that's why Maxx C is such a pain in the ass to deal with, because just having that level of BS happening is really not a fun scenario that most of us want to be dealing with. So with that in mind, the big argument still remains, are the Maxx C's, is Maxx C fair in comparison to the Mulch armies? No. So then once we remove Maxx C, we come back down to do we remove the Mulch armies from the equation? Because we split across the power, we no longer have to deal with the, all of this craziness wrapped up on one deck. Okay. So now that we split up the powers, and we've already kind of dubbed that it's a little bit more fair, and we can kind of play into this. What is the problem at this point? there is still this mindset block that a lot of this community has, that they should be allowed to play their turns slightly less uninterrupted. This comes into the same group of people that believe, Droll and Lockbird does need to go because it's a problem. These are the same group of people that believe that having the Mulcharmies existing and you netting a card or two or three or four, is bad card design. So, we need to ban these cards. You've also got the argument from people now that if you make the push to want to limit the Mulcharmies, so what if you were to start putting the Mulcharmies to ones? You run into the same issue that we had before with Maxx C, where if I draw that card against you, it is the sackiest interaction that you could ever want to deal with. And nobody wants to deal with oh man, I lost to a one of Fuawas. Oh my god, this game is so fun. I love you. You're gonna get those kind of people that are gonna be snippy because they got sacked by the one of. So at this point in time, Konami does this thing where they massively push these cards. They go, hey, we're reprinting these cards. Now everybody kind of starts to look around. Well, this is a sign that Konami wants to actually limit them to some capacity. I would not hate the idea to have the Mulcharmies semi-limited. I think at 2, it doesn't necessarily kill the concept. Yes, it feels a little bit more sacky, but at the exact same time, putting them to 1 is just absolute bullshit. 2 to 3 is where I would go with this. Now, there's also the argument of, well, what if they just want to limit one of the Mulcharmies? What if, keeping Meowls around at 3 is better, putting Fua at 2 and maybe putting, Perulia to leaving that at 3 as well? Because 99% of the time, if you, go through Perulia, unless you're playing against a deck that really wants to really play through from their hand, you're not gonna get a crap ton of advantage from Perulia. It'll get you a couple of cards, but Fua tends to be the one that's the most broken. From the deck and extra deck are really those big ones. So if any of them has a target on its back, I really do feel like it's Fua at this stage. The way that modern era Yu-Gi-Oh! Plays, I think realistically, what you're going to see is post the first reprint of these, I think they are still going to be very sought after cards, because these are things that everybody needs to have. Everybody needs to have some sort of Mulcharmies. Whether or not you're maining them or siding them, these are 100% cards that are very impactful for the betterment of your deck building space. And that's going to be something that I think as time progresses here, more people are kind of going to realize, oh, hey, staple cards, and I use staple here very, very intently, they really are cards that are very, very impactful for the development in the course of the game. But if you think otherwise, and you seem to think that, these cards are awful, Konami's not going to do anything with them, okay, congratulations. You just sat through an entire discussion on why, Maxx C has been bad for the game, how the progression towards, the Mulcharmies has been viewed by several players, and you still come to the conclusion that they're okay. And that's welcoming. I look forward to seeing, what Konami's take is going to be on these 3 cards in 2026. Now, a lot of these cards feel like they're designed with timers in mind. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see, a continuation and a growth on these as time kind of progresses. That being said, though, everybody, what do you think about our favorite Mulcharmies? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think, and I will see your beautiful faces back here in day, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.